Guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. So guys, I wanted to do a video and I wanted to do it about Amir Khan. Amir Khan. I haven't done a video about Amir Khan for a very long time. And he's made some comments recently, which obviously I need to discuss. Now. Amir Khan has made some comments, and before I go into what he had to say, and he basically backed Terence Crawford to give, Errol Spence a boxing lesson and outbox Errol Spence. He also made some comments about Tyson Fury and Joshua, saying that Joshua should stay away from Fury. He also said that he's willing to fight Kell Brook. Listen, Amir Khan's in a tricky spot here because no matter what he does or says, it seems to get criticized and it seems to get trolled. He seems to, whatever he says, just people love to hate him, which I kind of find kind of irritating and annoying because I just feel like this is a guy that's achieved a lot in boxing, and I feel like people struggle to give him any credit. I feel like he's almost treated like he was some kind of journeyman, that never achieved anything as an amateur or a pro, winning a silver medal at the age of 17, becoming a unified champion. And I've repeated the stuff. It's kind of boring now and that's why I stopped doing videos about Amir Khan, because it gets quite boring, talking about it and going on and what he's achieved and stuff, when I've mentioned it that not many British fighters have his kind of career, have his kind of achievements, and have the kind of resume the guy's got. Really, there's only two other fighters in the last 10 years really that have a resume like Khan, and that's Crawford, and maybe Joshua now is creeping up there, but Khan and Froch, really, his resume for me stands out amongst all the other top British fighters that we've had in the last 10, 12 years. Their resume, for me, stands out massively. It stands out massively. But for some reason, both those guys don't seem to get the credit. Especially Amir doesn't seem to get any credit. Like, I feel like people like to talk about his weaknesses more than they like to talk about his achievements and what he did and his boxing skill and his talent and his fast hands and it feels to me like they like to talk about his weaknesses a lot more and discredit him a lot more than actually give him credit for what he did. And it's kind of like annoying a little bit, because it's irritating, because he gets criticized for ducking Kell Brook, which he should have taken that fight. I feel like he should have taken that fight when they were both in their primes, because I think that fight could have taken him to different levels with the British public. And he probably doesn't care, to be honest, about what people think, but I just think that fight would have taken him to the next level with what he had already achieved in America with some of the great wins he had. I think that would have taken him to another level. The other thing I want to talk about is the fact that, people always mention that he lost his big fights, which again is a load of rubbish. Because if you go through Miguel Cotto's resume, he lost his big fights. If you go through Oscar De La Hoya's resume, he lost his big fights. If you go through a lot of great fighters' resume, they all lost their big fights. That doesn't mean they weren't great fighters. So that kind of narrative that people like to push, especially here in the UK, is a load of rubbish, by the way. Because Ricky Hatton lost his big fights. The two big fights that were there that would have made him a superstar, made him a legend, he got destroyed in both those fights. So, but yeah, he seems to get some kind of credit, like he was some kind of monster. But yeah, Amir Khan can't seem to get a break, and he was terrible and had no chin and he was rubbish, yet he beat more former world champions than Ricky Hatton. I don't quite understand. So At the end of the day, I studied a lot of British fighters. I've studied a lot of British fighters. And I've said in recent times that I think there was only really in the last 20, 25 years, two legends that have come out of British boxing. And that's Joe Calzaghe and Lennox Lewis. I feel like everybody else was good. There were some good fighters like Khan, like Hay, like Hatton, like, guys of that level, Froch. you know, but all of those guys failed at pound for pound level. They came a bit short. They didn't quite have the same. Although I do think Calzaghe, although he fought some guys past their prime, I was a really big fan of Joe Calzaghe. I think Calzaghe was really, really, really good. He had great speed, great footwork. He was just a very, very good fighter and a little bit underrated, to be honest. People think that, you know, he fought guys past their prime. He fought the big names past their prime. But nevertheless, they were still good fighters. And Joe Calzaghe was also old when he fought some of those. And he beat him. And I really rate Joe Calzaghe. And Lennox Lewis was, for me, the greatest British fighter. His boxing IQ, his movement, his power. He was just a complete fighter. He was just so, you know, complete. I think Fury could go into that kind of category depending on how his resume turns out, because at the minute his resume is really weak. Although he is a great fighter, I do think his resume is kind of weak at the minute. Anthony Joshua, let's see how he gets on with Fury. He's another fighter that I think obviously he's got a very good resume, and I actually mentioned him, didn't I, alongside Khan and Froch. I think these guys have got really good resumes and guys that have achieved a lot. In terms of the names that they've got on their resumes, I feel like they've got stellar names on their resumes. Whether not all of them were in their prime, but still they've got stellar names on their resumes. And I think you've got to give them credit for their resume and their careers in boxing, especially Froch and Khan have finished now, or Khan's near finished, Froch is finished. Joshua is still in the prime of his years, so we don't know what he's going to go, how his resume is going to stack up at the end, but he's got a really good resume. But the fact is that Khan, even with that resume and even with what he's done, he kind of doesn't seem to get credit. Now, some people seem to think it's because he fought majority of his career in America. And, you know, he didn't fight in front of the British fans. But what would you want him to do? The British scene, as Carl, and by the way, go give them a follow, Carl, you know, from Last Bell Boxing, and Ray and Andy and all those guys from Last Bell Boxing. Go give them a follow, give them a sub. You know, the thing what I like about those guys is, although Carl and Andy are not Amir's biggest fans, they give him credit where it's due. They're not there pushing an agenda, and they give him credit. Like Carl was on my channel on the live stream, and he actually said that, Imran, I'm not the biggest Khan fan, but yeah, I have to agree that Khan would have given Crawford nightmares in his prime. You see, because they say it how it is. They say what they feel. They're not there pushing an agenda. They're speaking boxing. They're speaking facts. There's too many, even YouTubers and too many people, boxing fans, that look there, that they don't speak the truth. They're just there to push agenda or take sides because of this and that. You've got to say it how it is. You've got to say it how it is. You know? We all know about Amir Khan's weaknesses, but we also know that he had great strengths. Otherwise, he wouldn't have achieved what he did in boxing if he didn't have something about him, if he didn't have those strengths. So I think you have to give credit where it's due, firstly. And I feel a lot of people, and I will get into the video. I know this is going to be a long one. I will get into the video. And when he gives his opinion, it's kind of like no matter what he says, he's doomed. Whether he says Spence beats or Crawford beats Spence, oh, he's talking rubbish, who cares about what? It's like, I feel like he almost gets dismissed. And he almost gets treated like he was some kind of journeyman, really. I don't really think he gets... I've seen guys like Kevin Mitchell, who was a good fighter, but never won a world title and didn't have anywhere near the career that Khan had, wasn't as good as Khan, right? He gets a lot more respect than Amir Khan for some reason. You know, I just can't. I've never seemed to figure it out because, yeah, I just never seem to get it figure it out, because this is a guy, like I said, that's resume is stellar, and to push a narrative that he lost all his big fights, that's again rubbish, because I just debunked that by saying Miguel Cotto lost all his big fights, Oscar De La Hoya lost his big fights, Shoaib Mosley lost his big fights. It doesn't mean anything by losing your big fights. He lost his big fights because he actually fought guys. He actually went up 2 weight classes to fight Canelo. You know, he went to Washington, D.C. to fight Lamont Peterson and ended up getting done in that fight, when really most people thought he won. But Amir Khan, in his prime, at 140 pounds, was a beast. He was a beast. And he beat virtually everybody. He was almost unstoppable at a point. There was a 2-year period in Amir Khan's career where you thought no one's going to beat him. He was unstoppable. And there's not many times I watch boxing and think, wow, even though, and by the way, even though he had a dicey chin, yet he still looked unstoppable. He still looked like a man that wasn't good. This didn't look like he was going to get beat. After the Prescott defeat, his run from there to Lamont Peterson, he didn't think he was going to get beat. And I think that actually, I'll say there to Danny Garcia, because Danny Garcia knocked Amir Khan out. But even in that fight, he was battering Garcia. So this is what I'm trying to say, that there was a period in Amir Khan's career where he was mentally in a great place. His skill-wise and he was just a beast at one point in his career. And then after the Danny Garcia defeat, he never managed to get that invincibility back that he had earlier on. After the Prescott defeat, he never managed to reach those levels again. And it wasn't him moving up weight. I think it was a mentality thing, and he became a more cautious fighter, because I think after being knocked out by Danny Garcia, he started becoming more of a fighter that's looking and more picking and choosing his fights and stuff, rather than throwing the dice. Because I believe he could have beaten top welterweights as well. They would have been harder fights and 50-50 fights, but he could have beaten them. But he didn't really jump in with the top welterweights, which he should have done. Like the Brook fight would have taken his legacy to another level. Some people still want to see that fight. I don't like that fight anymore. And let's get into the Brooks fight, because I don't really think it does anything. I think if Amir Khan gets beat by Kell Brook, he'll be laughed at. If he beats Kell Brook, no one's going to give a damn. No one's going to care. No one's going to care. They're just going to turn a blind eye to it. The fans aren't going to give him any credit for it. They're just going to turn a blind eye to it. But if he gets beat, then they will care. Then he'll be laughed at. So he's kind of in a lose-lose situation with that fight. If I'm honest with you, even though I think he should fight someone like Kell Brook, because it's a guy on his kind of level on the way out. Broner, Kell Brook, some fights like that. But I think if he wants to be adhered by the British public, which he wouldn't be if he takes the fight with Kell Brook now and beats him, I don't think he gets any credit, is probably fighting Conor Benn. Because Conor Benn's a young guy. Even then, if he was to fight someone like Conor Benn and beat him, there'll probably be an excuse for that. Oh, well, Ben was too young. But I think that would get more credit, because most people think Conor Benn beats Amir Khan. Conor Benn's a young, up-and-coming kid. And that would be seen as a more credible win right now. Because if Conor Benn's young and up-and-coming, I think if he was to beat Conor Benn, I think he gets a lot more credit for it. But there's not a lot in it for Khan apart from the dough, and I don't really know if he loses to Conor Benn again. It's kind of like humiliating in a way, because you're losing to a guy who not many people would have given a chance against you in their prime. Or most hardcore boxing fans wouldn't have given Conor Benn a chance in his prime. So you're kind of in a catch-22 where I do think he wants the Kell Brook fight now, and he's called Kell Brook out. And some people are saying that Amir Khan's holding up that fight. Amir Khan wants that fight now. You can clearly see that, he wants that fight, and he's training as well. So I personally think that fight is definitely in the pipeline. Who knows? It might be Brook's team now that's dragging the heels, because maybe Brook's thinking, I've been messed around too much and I want to fight Eubank, or, who knows? We just don't know. We don't know what's on the horizon, because if Brook goes down the route of Eubank, then that just Khan-Brook fight is finished forever. But I don't know what to make of the Khan-Brook fight, to be honest with you now. I don't know. I would still watch it, of course, and we'll all still watch it. It's still a big fight. It's still a fight that does decent numbers. It's still a fight that could make him a couple mil. And it's still a fight that would sell. It's a good payday. It's definitely going to make them money. Because you imagine if he takes that fight to Sky Sports now, they'll take that fight in a heartbeat. They've been wanting to make that fight for years. Even though they know that that fight's not going to do what it would have done, it still makes them a lot of money. It still, in my opinion, would make enough sense, and it would do enough pay-per-view. And the way Sky would promote it, I think people would tune in and people would buy it. There's a lot of people saying they're not going to buy it, they're this, that, and the other, but I think there are a lot of people that would buy it, especially if they can put on a good undercard. I think that people would definitely tune in. I think it's still a big enough fight and commercially still big enough for them to even do 20,000, 25,000. Because like I said, you could fight that fight in Bolton, for example, and people will come to, the Bolton community would turn out to watch Amir Khan. You know, a lot of people would turn out. It's not necessarily, here's the thing, when you got someone like Amir Khan, it's not necessarily just the boxing community that are interested. There'll be other people outside of that want to watch Amir Khan. You know, it's an event for them. They'll come and watch him because it's Amir Khan. You know, he kind of appeals to the casuals as well. Not so much just the boxing fans. You know, he has a star appeal about him. So I feel like he could definitely do decent. He could even sell 20, 30,000 easy, I think, in his home city, without question. The people will come to watch. I still think pay-per-view do decent numbers. I think it would do more numbers than what Lomachenko-Campbell did. You know, at 9, 10 o'clock UK time, people will buy that. £15, people will buy that without question. Without question, I wouldn't be surprised if it does 300 to 500,000 pay-per-view buys. Because, like I said, Sky know how to promote a fight. They know how to sell it, right? And by the time the fight week comes around, there's going to be a lot of people buzzing for it. So that fight still has marketability, just like Amir Khan and Adrian Broner would do. That fight still has marketability. There's still fights out there that have marketability, but they have to be guys at his level. You know, I just don't know what other fights really are out there, unless Amir Khan pulls a rabbit out the hat and surprises us all with a fighter that he fights. Who knows? But, you know, hopefully it's someone that, you know, that makes it a fun fight. A fun build-up. Not necessarily even a fun fight, but a fun build-up, or someone that's like a Broner or someone. Someone like that would make it fun, that people would tune in and people would be excited for. You know? Hopefully it's something on that kind of level, not like, you know, another fight in Saudi Arabia or, you know, against Billy Dib or some, you know, like something that means something and something that would get fans excited to watch. A Brook fight definitely does that, and a Broner fight definitely does that. Those are the two names that really stand out. And who knows, maybe Amir Khan pulls a rabbit out and ends up fighting Porter. Who knows? That would be very, very dangerous, and dangerous in the sense that it would be a fight that people give Amir no chance in at this point. But it would be a great fight. It'd be something that, you know, I'd look forward to. But I don't think a Porter fight, he'd look for a Porter fight. I think it's more Brook. I think he wants the Brook fight now. I think he wants that fight. And it makes sense, right? What's Brook got? Where's Brook gonna go? They're talking about him fighting Eubank, but that's a crazy fight. So yeah, I like that fight. I like that fight. Khan Brook, make it happen. But I do think the Conor Ben fight, he'd get a lot more credibility if he takes that and wins. But then he'd be fighting a young kid who hasn't really achieved a lot in boxing yet. And if he beats him, it can be quite embarrassing. Whereas at least if you lose to Brook, you're losing to a former world champion. So it has to be something like that. I personally think the Brook fight will happen, and I think he wants the Brook fight. And maybe Brook might play hard now because Brook might want the money he wants now. Who knows? That's the only really credible. There's always going to be options for Amir Khan because he's a big name, he's a big star. So there's always going to be options there on the table, especially with guys at the same level that he's at. It's just not at world championship level. So like the Crawford Spence, that's not going to happen anymore. He's not going to be able to fight at that kind of level, but definitely could fight against your Adrian Broners of the world, you know, guys like that. Maybe even a Danny Garcia rematch with, you know, that would be a good fight. You know, that would be a fight that people would be interested for. Even though, again, Garcia would be a massive favorite in that fight, but still, it would be a fight that people would be interested in. You know, because any fight that Amir takes, the Brook fight, the Garcia fight, the Broner fight, anything's a risk now. With where he's at, anything's a risk. Do you understand? You know, and he could lose to literally anyone. We just don't know what he's got left. So anything's potentially a risk. So I know people are going to say, well, Garcia would knock him out again. Anything is a risk at this point. I want to talk about some of the comments that he made about Terence Crawford over Errol Spence. Now, people are going to say the reason why Amir Khan's saying that because Crawford beat him, and he's trying to, you know, just saying that because Crawford and fighters say that because when someone beats you, you want to big them up, so it bigs up your career. Firstly, Amir Khan's a former unified champion. He's entitled to his opinion. He's been in the ring with Crawford. He knows how good Terence Crawford is. Right? And Amir Khan had some of the best skills in boxing. So if he's telling you someone's skillful, someone's good, he knows what he's talking about. Also, Kell Brook fought both Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't he say that would be seen as a great fight? But yeah, you'd probably give Crawford the edge. And Kell Brook fought both of them. And he was in his prime when he fought Spence. And yet he still said that Crawford is a great fighter. And thinks Crawford might edge it out against Spence. So Amir Khan's just giving his opinion about that fight. And Crawford, I've said this about Crawford, I think Crawford could beat Spence as well. There's no guarantee Crawford doesn't beat Spence. Like, Spence is a great fighter and one of my favorite fighters in boxing today. And I would favor Spence in the fight. But by no means that Crawford can't beat Errol Spence. Crawford can beat Errol Spence, no problem. Crawford could outbox. Listen, I don't know how good Terence Crawford is. Terence Crawford may be something unbelievable. And he may go in there and absolutely wipe the floor with Spence. And what I mean by that, wipe the floor, is completely dominate him and outclass him and make him look bad. Who knows? Because Crawford is very versatile. He is very skilled. He is very good. So Amir Khan might not be wrong. Let's not forget, Amir Khan is giving his opinion on this fight. You don't have to agree. You don't have to think what he's saying is right or wrong. He's giving his opinion. His opinion is his opinion. And he may be right. And he may be right. Let's not forget, he's been in there with Terence Crawford. He's been in there with a lot of world-class fighters. And he ranks Terence Crawford very highly. He's been in there with a lot of good fighters. A lot of skilled fighters. So he knows. Although Amir Khan got beat by Danny Garcia, you don't see him have the same kind of respect for Danny Garcia because he feels that he should have won that fight. He feels that he should have dominated Danny Garcia. He made a mistake and got caught and got beat. But yet, when he fought Terence Crawford, even though Amir Khan was past his best, he still has a lot of respect for Crawford because he knows that this guy's skill set is on another level. And if you were to ask him about Crawford and Danny Garcia, yet he got beat by both, he would say hands down Crawford beats him comfortably. That's because he's talking about Crawford's skill and ability and talent. And Crawford has got great skill. I personally think Spence also has great skill and talent. And I think Spence is bigger, so that's why I favor Spence. But by no means am I denying that Crawford could dominate Errol Spence. Crawford may have 15, 20 gears to him. I don't know. We've not seen it yet. And maybe when he fights an elite welterweight, maybe he might take his game to another level that we haven't seen him take it to. This is what I'm trying to say. So he may be right about that. And there's another comment that he made about Joshua Fury. He said that Joshua should stay away from Fury. Now, sometimes some things can be misinterpreted. He did say that Joshua should stay away from Fury, but I don't think he meant it in a way where, oh, that fight shouldn't happen. And he was saying it in a way, I don't think he's going to win that fight. But it got misinterpreted. Oh, like he's saying, telling Fury to duck and this, that, and the other. Come on. Amir Khan wants to probably see that fight. He was just saying it from the sense that he doesn't think Joshua wins. So maybe he thinks that he should take, you know, milk it a little bit, make some money, make some more money, and then maybe jump in with Fury. Because that fight is eventually going to happen, isn't it? That fight's eventually going to happen. So maybe Joshua fighting guys like Usyk and, you know, other guys out there, have a couple of more fights, you know, and then jump in with a Tyson Fury. But yeah, I don't think he means Joshua should just completely avoid him and never fight him and duck him and stay completely away. I don't think he meant it like that. But again, a lot of the things that Amir Khan that he says gets misinterpreted and kind of gives the people twist it the way they want to twist it. Because like I said, there are a lot of people out there that seem to have a problem with him. But again, there's a lot of people that like to be brave on social media and to say things and this, that, and the other. But yeah, it's easy talking. Like, I'm here talking. It's easy to do that. It's hard to go and do what some of these guys have done in boxing, and especially in a sport which is very tough. Very, very tough. You know, I respect Joshua, Fury, all of these guys. All of these guys have achieved a lot. Khan, you know, Froch, all of these guys. Like, I'm not a big fan of, for example, Froch. I think sometimes he can come across quite irritating, but I respect his boxing career massively. I differentiate from the person and his boxing career. And that's what I feel like a lot of people struggle to do with Amir Khan, for example. I think some people don't like Amir Khan as a character. Maybe they just find him irritating or whatever. But they struggle to differentiate his character from his boxing career. You may not like somebody as a person, but that doesn't mean you can't give him credit for what he's done in boxing. And I feel there's too many people out there like that just don't seem to give him any credit. You know, but yeah, that's just my take, and it's been a bit of a long one, but I had to get it out there. I think Amir Khan and Kell Brook will happen. Personally, I think there's seems to be positive talks. I think the fight will happen, to be honest with you. In terms of giving him a prediction, I think if this fight had happened in their primes, I think it would have been a 50-50 fight. That could have gone either way. I think Kell Brook would have had to knock Amir Khan out, and I think Amir Khan would have beat Kell Brook on points if he didn't knock him out. I think it was a proper 50-50 fight, and it would have been a legacy fight for both. And it probably would have definitely been both his biggest win. I don't know whether it would have been Khan's biggest win, if I'm honest. It would have been his biggest win in terms of to the British public, for sure. But yeah, I think it would have been a very even match fight. I think it could have gone either way. And that's what made the fight so intriguing, because both guys had their flaws. Both guys had their strengths. And this was, for me, a level above Froch Groves. I think this was a way bigger fight than Froch Groves. Way bigger fight. And that did huge. And you probably could have fought. They probably could have fought maybe twice. But unfortunately, Amir Khan was in America, fighting guys in America. But this is a fight that I just think should have happened, man. Should have happened. Should have happened. Yeah, it's disappointing. It's disappointing because it would have been a huge fight, man. It would have been a huge fight, and it would have captivated the British public. It would have captivated the boxing British public, without question. It would have even captured the casuals, because Amir Khan Amir Khan never had a super fight here in the UK. This would have been a super fight. I'm talking, it would have been a mega fight. This would have done easy 90, could have done 100,000 people, and it would have broke, for me, it would have done crazy pay-per-view numbers, well over 1 million. Probably might have even done 1.3 to 1.5 million. It would have done stupid numbers, honestly. Because the way Eddie Hearn would have promoted that fight, the kind of promotion Sky would have given that fight, oh my God, there would have been so many pay-per-view buys. That fight would have done crazy numbers. Honestly, would have done silly numbers. I think Froch Groves did over 1 million, and this was way bigger than Froch Groves. Way bigger. Yeah, so it's kind of sad in a way that the fight didn't happen, because I think it would have been an absolute monster of a fight. But, you know, it is what it is. A lot of those fights didn't happen. Junior Witter never fought Ricky Hatton. Or Hatton didn't fight Junior Witter. You know, Calzaghe didn't fight Froch. You know, unfortunately, some of these guys didn't fight each other. It's just one of those things. It happens. But I feel like Amir Khan seems to get more stick for not fighting Kell Brook than those guys did. Although, like I said, I don't think those fights were as big, because I don't think Froch was that big at that point when that fight was being talked about. And I don't think Witter was that big. I still think it would have been a big fight, don't get me wrong, and it's a fight that should have happened. But I think Amir Khan, Kell Brook were two guys in their prime, and it was a way bigger fight than those fights. And the fact that it was a 50-50 fight shows how great Amir Khan was, because Amir Khan was a guy that started off at 135. Kell Brook was a natural 147 fighter. He was naturally bigger and stronger than Amir Khan. And yet it was still seen as a 50-50 fight. And actually, I think the bookies would have had Amir Khan a slight favourite in that fight, if that fight had happened when Brook won the title. I think they would have had Amir Khan a slight favourite. But amongst the British public, it would have been a 50-50 matchup. It would have been seen as a fight that could potentially go either way. And it should have happened. It should have happened. But what I'm trying to point out is that Amir Khan was smaller than Kell Brook. Kell Brook was a naturally bigger man. If Kell Brook was naturally smaller than Khan, I don't think he would have had much of a shot of beating Amir Khan at all, by the way, because I think Amir Khan would have outworked him, outclassed him, if he was naturally bigger. The chance Brook had was Brook was a bigger man. He was stronger, and obviously we know Amir Khan was vulnerable, and Brook had enough punching power to hurt Amir Khan. That's what made the fight interesting, and that's what made the fight a 50-50 fight. But if Brook was smaller, Brook would stand not a very good chance, and it wouldn't be seen as a 50-50 fight. It would actually be seen as heavily in favour of Khan. Because Brook was, for me, a much bigger guy, and he had a bit of pop, it would have been a very interesting fight. I still don't think he would have been able to live with Khan in terms of boxing skill and being able to outwork him, but he had the power and to stop him. So that's what would have made that fight interesting. I would have edged towards Khan towards points, but I wouldn't be saying that with any confidence, to be honest. It would have been a very, very good fight, because Kell Brook was technically very sound and he was a good, solid puncher. So that would have been a good fight, without question. But fortunately, we never got to see it. But leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think, guys, in the comment section below. And guys, remember to please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.